What happens when a 27-year-old man walks into court believing a governor's last name can erase blood on asphalt, hospital bills, and the fear still shaking in 3 innocent people weeks later? Drop a comment telling us what you think should happen when privilege collides with justice. Because in the next few minutes, you're about to hear the moment one arrogant threat met a judge who could not be moved. Before this story is over, one sentence from Judge Caprio will turn a packed courtroom silent, and one phone call meant to intimidate the bench will end up exposing something far bigger than one reckless driver. It was 8:42 on a wet Tuesday morning, October 14, 2025, outside Providence Municipal Court at 325 Washington Street. The sky over downtown Rhode Island hung low and gray, and the granite steps were slick with a cold drizzle that made everyone hurry except the man in the navy Brioni blazer. Hit that subscribe button if you believe real character is revealed when people stop getting special treatment, because Adrian Mercer wasn't rushing. Men like Adrian had spent their whole lives watching doors wait for them. He came through security with a smile too polished to be sincere and a confidence that felt rehearsed. His black Tom Ford loafers barely made a sound on the courthouse tile, and the silver of a Rolex Submariner flashed under the fluorescent lights each time he lifted his phone. Like this video, if you believe a courtroom should be the one place where a bank balance, a famous uncle, and a perfect haircut mean absolutely nothing, because Adrian was about to test that idea harder than anyone in the building expected. Outside, parked illegally for 12 full minutes in a loading zone, sat his 2024 Cadillac Escalade V, black on black, windows tinted dark enough to turn the reflection of the courthouse into a smear of gray. Inside the courtroom, people had already started whispering his name. Share this with someone who needs to see what happens when entitlement finally meets a wall it can't buy its way around, because Adrian Mercer was not in court over some harmless misunderstanding. He was there because 3 people still carried August 23 in their bodies. The official file read Case 25-TR-1184 and Companion Municipal Complaint 25-MC-771. The charges were simplified for municipal court: reckless driving, failure to yield to pedestrians, leaving the immediate scene before giving complete information, disorderly conduct, and interference with an officer during a traffic investigation. The legal language was dry. The reality was not. At 10:17 p.m. on August 23, at the intersection of Weybosset Street and Dorrance, Adrian's Escalade had surged through a stale yellow, then a red on rain-slick pavement, forcing a bike courier into a steel trash can, clipping a delivery van into a hydrant, and sending a retired lunchroom worker spinning to the sidewalk with grocery bags bursting around her. Judge Frank Caprio entered at 8:59 exactly, black robe neat, reading glasses low, expression calm in that way only people with long memory can be calm. The murmur in the room settled into silence so complete that the scrape of one folding chair sounded like a shout. Adrian did not stand until his attorney, Harrison Pike, touched his sleeve. Harrison was the kind of defense lawyer who wore charcoal suits with no wrinkles and expressions with even fewer. He rose smoothly, nodded to the clerk, and leaned toward Adrian with the confidence of a man who had spent a career turning consequences into paperwork. Judge Caprio glanced down at the file, then over the room, seeing more than faces. He saw Officer Elena Ruiz in uniform at the side wall, posture straight, bodycam download envelope under her arm. He saw Maria Bell, age 67, sitting in the front row in a pale blue cardigan despite the cold, one hand pressed over the ribs that still hurt when she coughed. He saw Luis Batista, 41, broad-shouldered but moving carefully because his left rotator cuff had not fully healed. He saw Jamal Reed, 19, right arm still stiff from a fractured collarbone, trying hard to look older than 19, and failing every time he shifted in pain. "Mr. Mercer," the judge said, voice even, "I understand you have counsel. I also understand there are injured citizens here. So before anyone tells me why this case should disappear, I'm going to hear from the people who couldn't." Adrian smirked, not widely, just enough to tell the room he considered this an inconvenience. He was 27, 6 feet tall, trim from private trainers and expensive gyms, with the kind of handsome face that had never had to sit alone with shame for very long. He grew up in Barrington in a cedar-shingled house overlooking water most people only saw on postcards. His father, Daniel Mercer, had built a finance career and died of a heart attack when Adrian was 14. After that, Charlotte Mercer, Daniel's widow and the governor's younger sister, did what grieving mothers with money sometimes do when guilt and fear twist together. She protected everything except the one thing that mattered. She protected him from consequence. At St. Bartholomew Prep, when Adrian got caught throwing a champagne bottle off a dorm balcony and cracking a dean's windshield, the family lawyer handled it. At 19, when he sideswiped a parked Subaru in Newport and drove off, insurance resolved it. At 22, when he was stopped for speeding at 93 on I-95 South, the charge somehow melted into a non-moving violation. Each time he learned the same dangerous lesson: rules were for strangers. By 27, arrogance had become muscle memory. He didn't think of himself as cruel. He thought of himself as exempt. Maria Bell was sworn first. She stood slowly, every movement measured, the way older people move when pain has taught them to negotiate with gravity. Her silver hair was pinned carefully. Her shoes were worn brown flats polished to a dull shine. When she raised her hand, the courtroom saw the bruise-yellow traces still fading along her wrist. "My name is Maria Bell," she said. "I worked 28 years in the lunchroom at Bailey Elementary. I retired 2 years ago. I was crossing on the signal with groceries from Market Basket. I had soup, bread, milk, canned peaches, and cereal because my grandson Owen likes the honey kind." The room stayed still. Even Adrian stopped looking at his phone. "I heard an engine before I saw the car," Maria continued. "A loud one, the kind that feels angry. I turned and lights were on me. I dropped the bags. I remember oranges rolling. I remember one hitting the curb and splitting open. Then I remember the ground. I couldn't breathe right away." Her voice shook, not dramatically, just honestly. "I cracked a rib, bruised my hip, needed 6 stitches above my eyebrow because my glasses cut me. But the worst part wasn't the fall. It was hearing that young man get out and ask what happened to his bumper." A sound moved through the gallery then, a low, disbelieving exhale. Adrian shifted in his chair. "Did he ask if you were hurt?" Judge Caprio asked. "No, Your Honor," Maria said. "He asked if somebody got his plate number." Louis Battista came next. He wore a red tie that had been knotted too tightly, maybe because men who are trying not to fall apart often pull something else too hard. He worked for Ocean State Pharmacy making late deliveries, and August 23 had been his second double shift of the week. His wife Carla had stage 2 breast cancer the year before. The treatment debt had not disappeared just because the chemo was over. He still drove nights because medicine, rent, and hope were all expensive. "I was headed south on Dorrance," Louis said. "I had blood pressure meds in the van for 2 seniors and insulin that needed to stay cold. I saw the Escalade jump the light. I hit my brakes. If I didn't turn, I would have taken him driver's side, so I turned. My van hit the hydrant." He held up his left hand. It trembled before he made a fist. "Torn shoulder. 8 weeks off work. Insurance fought me because they said I swerved voluntarily. I missed physical therapy twice because my wife needed scans in Boston and we only got 1 car. My daughter Sophia is 10. She started asking if we were going to lose the apartment because she heard me on the phone with collections." There it was. The room changed. Stories do that when they stop being about a ticket and start being about a child listening through a bedroom door. If you're still with us, drop a comment telling us whether you think financial damage should count just as much as physical injury when somebody drives like the road belongs to them, because Louis wasn't asking for pity. He was giving the court a ledger of harm money had never fully covered. Jamal Reed took the stand last, and if Maria brought sorrow into the room, Jamal brought the sharp edge of interrupted possibility. He was 19, a first-year student at CCRI, studying graphic design and delivering food on a black Trek FX3 bike at night to cover tuition gaps his Pell Grant didn't. He wore a thrifted navy jacket and sneakers with frayed laces, and he looked at Adrian with a steadiness that made the older man blink first. "I was in the bike lane," Jamal said. "Rain was light, road was slick. I saw Mrs. Bell in the crosswalk, so I slowed. Then I heard the escalade. He came over the line and I had nowhere to go. I hit the trash can, shoulder broke, helmet cracked, lost 6 weeks of work. Missed an internship interview because I couldn't even put on a backpack." He paused, swallowed, and then said the part nobody forgot. "You know what I remember most? Not the crash, not even the pain. I remember him looking at me on the ground like I was the one who inconvenienced him." Harrison Pike stood. "Your Honor, with respect, we're here on municipal traffic-related matters. My client disputes portions of these emotional characterizations." Judge Caprio looked up. "Counselor, reality often sounds emotional to the person who caused it." A few people in the back actually gasped. One woman muttered, "Lord." Adrian's jaw tightened. Harrison tried again. "My client has expressed willingness to resolve property damage and appropriate medical reimbursement through insurance channels." Lewis gave a short, bitter laugh he instantly regretted. Maria looked down at her hands. Jamal stared straight ahead. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Insurance may address invoices. It does not address attitude. And from what I've heard so far, attitude may be the biggest part of this case." That was when Adrian finally spoke without being asked. "With all due respect, Judge, this is turning into theater." The sentence landed hard because of the way he said "judge," clipped and dismissive, as if the robe were a prop. Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Theater uses scripts, Mr. Mercer. Pain doesn't." The clerk stopped writing for half a second. Officer Elena Ruiz looked down to hide what might have been the beginning of a smile. Harrison whispered urgently, but Adrian was already leaning forward, irritation replacing polish. "This whole thing is getting blown out of proportion," Adrian said. "Nobody died. Repairs can be paid. Medical bills can be handled. I don't know why we're pretending this has to become some public spectacle." Jamal's face flushed. Maria closed her eyes. Lewis whispered something under his breath that only God and the front bench heard. Judge Caprio tapped the file. "Because when somebody says nobody died, as if that's the standard for acceptable conduct, the public deserves to hear the rest." Then the judge turned to Officer Ruiz. "Officer, you have video." "I do, Your Honor. Traffic camera, adjacent surveillance, and my body cam from the stop." The room drew in one collective breath. Adrian sat back. Harrison's fingers tightened around his pen. And in the silence before the footage played, Adrian muttered just loudly enough for the microphone to catch 3 words that made half the courtroom look up at once. "One phone call." Nobody moved. Not the clerk, not the bailiff, not even Harrison Pike. The phrase hung there like the first crack in lake ice. Judge Caprio lifted his eyes slowly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer. Did you say something?" Adrian held the judge's gaze and shrugged with the lazy confidence of a man who had spent years mistaking other people's restraint for fear. "I said this could all be handled with one phone call." Now the silence turned physical. You could feel it in shoulders, in throats, in the way the fluorescent hum seemed to get louder because nobody else was breathing. In the second row, a local reporter lowered her notebook and stared. Everyone in that room knew they had just crossed from ordinary hearing into the kind of moment people would replay 100 times online. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair. Calm, still, almost gentle. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "a courtroom is the one room in this city where a last name has no vote." The words hit with the clean force of a gavel. Maria looked up. Jamal's eyes widened. Lewis actually exhaled like he'd been holding air since August. Adrian's arrogance flickered but didn't disappear. "That sounds nice, Judge, but we both know that's not how the world works." Caprio nodded once. "Perhaps that's why people come here, to find out whether, just for a few minutes, it can." Officer Ruiz connected the monitor. Grainy city traffic footage filled the screen. Timestamp: 8/23/2025, 22/17/09. The light at Weybosset shifted red. Pedestrians stepped. Maria, tiny under an umbrella, began to cross. Jamal entered frame in the bike lane. Then came the Escalade, black grille gleaming under rain, pushing through the intersection half a beat too fast for reason and far too fast for wet pavement. Viewers in the courtroom flinched even though they knew what was coming. You saw Maria's grocery bags burst. A carton slid. Oranges rolled. Jamal's front wheel jerked sideways. The bike struck the trash can hard enough to fold metal. Lewis's van swerved into the hydrant with a flash of water and headlights. People in the gallery winced, covered mouths, whispered no, no, no under their breath. And then, in footage from a parking garage angle, the Escalade stopped. The driver's door opened. Adrian stepped out in a cream cashmere sweater that had probably cost more than Jamal's semester books. He looked first at the front bumper, then at the headlight, then around to see who was recording. Only after that did he turn toward Maria, who was trying to sit up and failing. The soundless footage somehow made the scene worse. The court watched Adrian spread his hands in irritation. They saw him point at the front of the Escalade. They saw him step toward Jamal and say something sharp. They saw Officer Ruiz arrive, body cam already blinking. When the body cam audio replaced the silent footage, the room heard the words clearly. Rain hissed on pavement. A woman cried. Sirens started somewhere close. Adrian's voice cut through it all, impatient and offended. "Do you know who I am? I'm not standing here in the rain for this. Call your supervisor." Officer Ruiz's voice came steady and clipped. "Sir, step back from the injured parties and provide your license." Then Adrian said what took the oxygen out of the room. "You touch my car or write me up, and I'll have your badge discussed by breakfast." Discussed by breakfast, not challenged, not appealed, discussed. The phrase sounded practiced, inherited, and ugly. If you believe moments like that reveal a person faster than any polished public statement ever could, like this video right now, because the footage was doing more than proving reckless driving. It was uncovering an entire worldview. And Judge Caprio had not said a single unnecessary word yet. Officer Ruiz testified from the witness stand with a precision that made her credibility impossible to shake. She described rain conditions, skid pattern measurements, lane positions, and witness statements. She explained that Adrian initially refused a second request to step away from Maria Bell while EMS assessed her. She explained that he was not intoxicated above legal limit, but did smell of alcohol, enough to note, not enough to charge. She explained that he kept reaching for his phone and saying he knew people. "Did he identify who he knew?" Harrison Pike asked. "He said, and I quote, 'My uncle runs this state,'" Officer Ruiz answered. Adrian rubbed his forehead. For the first time, irritation was losing ground to discomfort. Judge Caprio looked down at a supplement in the file. "Officer, I also see a notation that Mr. Mercer had prior traffic contacts in Warwick and Newport." "Yes, Your Honor, 4 in the last 3 years, all resolved without substantial penalty." "How convenient," Caprio said softly. Harrison objected, "Relevance." Caprio overruled him. Pattern is relevance when a young man thinks one more violation is just another expense. Adrian leaned toward his lawyer. The smirk was gone now, replaced by something more brittle. He wasn't ashamed yet. Men like Adrian rarely arrived at shame in one step. First they arrived at annoyance, then disbelief, then offense that reality had not followed the usual script. The judge turned back to Maria. "Mrs. Bell, is your grandson here today?" A small boy in the second row sat up straight. He couldn't have been older than 9. Hair cut unevenly, Spider-Man backpack at his feet, glasses too big for his face. He raised his hand before remembering court wasn't school. A few sad smiles moved through the room. Owen insisted on coming, Maria said. He said he wanted to see where grown-ups tell the truth. That sentence struck harder than anyone expected. Even Harrison Pike blinked. Owen looked at Adrian with the open, confused seriousness children reserve for adults who have failed some basic test. Judge Caprio lowered his voice. "And what do you want him to learn today, Mrs. Bell?" Maria answered without hesitation, "That the law sees regular people too." The judge sat very still after that. Everyone in the room knew something had shifted. This was no longer about a reckless rich man getting lectured. It was becoming a referendum on whether ordinary pain counted when powerful families were involved. And the one person least prepared for that transformation was the young man at defense table, staring at the monitor like he still believed better tailoring could outlast evidence. Recess was denied. Judge Caprio kept the hearing moving, maybe because he sensed momentum, maybe because he knew truth loses heat when you let influence organize itself in the hallway. Harrison Pike requested Chambers' conference. Denied. He requested a brief pause to consult with his client. Granted, 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes became its own kind of spectacle. Adrian bent close to Harrison. His whisper was fierce enough to redden his face. Harrison whispered back, calmer, more urgent, the way men do when explaining that the old tricks are failing in real time. At the back of the courtroom, 2 reporters typed furiously. One of them sent a text that simply read, "Caprio hearing turning explosive. Possible quote already viral." Then the side door opened, and Charlotte Mercer entered. She was 53 and elegant in the way old money women often are. Beige wool coat, pearl earrings, hair pulled back too tightly because control had become a habit. But her face gave her away. She looked like a woman who had not slept. She took one look at the victim's bench, then at her son, then at the monitor frozen on the image of Maria Bell falling, and for a split second she looked smaller than anybody in the room. Adrian saw her and frowned. "Mom, why are you here?" Charlotte did not answer immediately. She sat behind him, hands clasped so hard the knuckles blanched. Judge Caprio acknowledged her with a nod, but did not let the hearing bend around her arrival. Instead, he asked the clerk to read the written impact summary from Rhode Island Hospital. The report described Maria's rib fracture, Jamal's clavicle fracture, Lewis's shoulder tear, and the lasting anxiety symptoms each reported in follow-up visits. Maria had begun avoiding crosswalks unless someone walked with her. Jamal reported panic when hearing engines accelerate behind him. Lewis had developed intermittent insomnia and financial stress severe enough that his primary physician recommended counseling. These are the details people outside a courtroom rarely hear, but they matter. The crash ends in seconds. The consequences keep showing up at 2:13 in the morning when someone wakes sweating, or at the pharmacy counter when an insurance copay comes due, or in the tiny pause before stepping off a curb. Share this with someone who thinks careless driving is just a mistake and not a chain reaction, because every report in that file said the same thing without using the same words. Adrian Mercer's impatience had entered other people's lives and stayed there. Judge Caprio then did something Harrison Pike clearly had not anticipated. He asked Adrian about his background directly. "Mr. Mercer, where did you go to school?" Adrian frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Answer the question." "St. Bartholomew, then Emerson for a while." "Employment." "I work in development." Judge Caprio glanced at the file. "Family real estate development." Adrian said nothing. "Live where?" "Barrington." "With your mother?" "No, in a condo on College Hill." "Who pays the note?" Harrison rose. "Your Honor." Caprio cut him off with a small, raised hand. "I'm trying to understand whether Mr. Mercer has ever had to live 1 week where his own mistakes threatened his own shelter. That landed like a stone in water. Charlotte lowered her head. Adrian looked toward her, then away. "My bills are handled," Adrian said coldly. "So are your lessons, apparently," the judge replied. At that, Charlotte finally spoke. Her voice was low and frayed. "Frankly, Your Honor, not well enough." All heads turned. Adrian whipped around. "Mom." But she kept going. "I am not here to excuse him." There it was, another crack, small but real. She stood when the judge invited her forward. "I loved my son badly," she said, and the room went silent in a different way now, not with tension but with recognition. "After his father died, every time the world tried to correct him, I stepped in first. Every suspension, every ticket, every angry phone call from a school office. I told myself I was protecting a grieving boy. Then years passed, and I was protecting a grown man from becoming one." Adrian stared at her like she had spoken a foreign language. "You're doing this here?" he asked. Charlotte turned toward him, and what she said next was not loud, but it was devastating. "No, Adrian, you did this here. I'm just done lying about it." Jamal looked down. Maria put a hand over her mouth. Louis shook his head once, slowly, as if stunned by the truth arriving from the least expected place. The judge thanked Charlotte and asked her to sit. Then he did something almost no one in the room expected. He asked if there were any written materials submitted by the victims beyond the hospital reports. The clerk handed up 3 envelopes. The first was from Carla Battista. She couldn't attend because of a follow-up oncology appointment in Boston, but her letter was read aloud. She wrote that Louis had learned to dress himself one-handed while helping her through chemotherapy, that he never complained about the pain because he was trying to keep the household steady, and that after the crash he cried only once in the kitchen, when he thought nobody could hear. She wrote that their daughter Sophia had started checking the apartment window each night until Louis got home, because she no longer trusted red lights to keep people safe. The second letter came from Jamal's internship coordinator at a design studio in Pawtucket. It confirmed that Jamal had lost the fall placement because he couldn't lift boxes, mount boards, or reliably bike to the office while recovering. "He was early to every interview communication," the letter said. "He carried himself with unusual maturity. We hope to reconsider him in the future." Jamal stared at the floor while the clerk read it. Losing the internship had cost him more than money. It had cost momentum. The third letter was in large, careful handwriting from Owen Bell, age 9. The courtroom almost couldn't bear it. "Dear Judge," it began, "my Nana says not to hate people because that makes 2 broken hearts instead of 1. But I do want the man to know I had to help her put on her socks for 3 weeks. I am not mad because she got hurt. I am mad because he looked like it was no big deal." You could hear sniffles now. Someone in the back wiped their face. Even the bailiff's expression tightened. Adrian sat motionless. This was the first truly dangerous stage for him, not legally but psychologically. When people like him encounter pain in invoice form, they negotiate. When they encounter pain in a child's handwriting, negotiation starts to fail. Judge Caprio looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Mercer, do you have anything to say at this point?" And here came the choice. A wise answer could have changed the temperature. A sincere apology, even imperfect, might have opened a door. Harrison Pike leaned in and whispered, "Now, this is the time." But arrogance is addicted to timing badly. Adrian lifted his chin and said, "I'm sorry they were upset. I'm sorry anybody got hurt. But I think this is becoming something it isn't because of who my family is." No one reacted at first. The sheer emptiness of that statement needed a second to settle. Then Jamal let out one sharp laugh of disbelief. Louis looked at the ceiling. Maria closed her eyes as if asking heaven for patience it had already spent. Judge Caprio did not look angry. Somehow that made it worse. "You still don't understand," he said. "This became something because of what you did. Your family name only changed how long you expected to avoid that fact. If that line hit you, Drop a comment telling us whether you've ever seen someone confuse privilege with innocence, because the difference matters. Innocence means you didn't do harm. Privilege means you think harm doesn't stick to you. And in that courtroom, for the first time in Adrian Mercer's life, the difference was being dragged into daylight one sentence at a time. Officer Ruiz requested permission to add one more clip. Harrison objected, then withdrew the objection after a whispering consultation that looked more desperate than strategic. The clip came from a private parking garage camera down the block, angle-wide, audio partial. It showed the immediate aftermath from another view. Maria on the ground, Jamal against the bent trash can, Lewis climbing from the van, Adrian turning, phone to ear. The audio was rough, but one line came through clearly enough to freeze the room. "Uncle Tom, they're making a whole thing out of this." Not because he called his uncle, not even because the uncle was the governor, but because in that tone, in that first instinct, there was the full map of his character. Not "are they okay?" Not "I messed up." Not "send help." They're making a whole thing out of this. Charlotte's shoulders collapsed. She looked like the last fragile defense of denial had finally been removed from her hands. Judge Caprio spoke softly. "Mr. Mercer, when regular people have an emergency, they call an ambulance. You called influence." Adrian looked back at the judge, and now there was actual heat in him. Defensive heat. Cornered heat. "Because I knew exactly how this would go. Everybody sees my name and decides I'm guilty of more than whatever actually happened." The judge nodded. "And everybody sees those injuries and knows your name didn't bleed." That line moved through the courtroom like an electric current. Reporters were writing it down before he finished speaking. A woman near the aisle whispered, "That one's everywhere by noon." At this point, Harrison made his strongest legal move. He argued that while the court could impose fines, restitution recommendations, and license-related penalties, the hearing was drifting into a moral lecture rather than a traffic adjudication. He was technically half right, but half right in the wrong room is still wrong. Judge Caprio agreed on the law and then changed the battlefield. "Very well," he said. "We will stay within my authority, but within that authority I will use every inch." He reviewed the timeline, the footage, the testimony, and the documented impact with meticulous care. He found Adrian responsible on reckless driving, failure to yield, disorderly conduct, and interference, reserving the information-sharing issue for referral. He noted the prior pattern, the contemptuous statements, and the absence of genuine remorse. His voice remained calm. That calm became oppressive. Everyone in the room could feel sentence approaching like weather. Then Adrian made the fatal mistake. Harrison was still speaking when Adrian pushed back his chair and stood. "You know what?" he said. "Go ahead, max me out, suspend whatever. You want a performance? Fine. But if you think I'm going to sit here while you turn me into some symbol, I won't. I can make one phone call, and by lunch this whole circus changes." The words slammed into the room. This time there was no ambiguity. This was not muttered frustration. This was a direct threat wrapped in confidence. The bailiff straightened. Harrison's face drained of color. Charlotte whispered, "Adrian, stop," but it was too late. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and set them down with deliberate care. When he looked up, his voice was quiet enough that everyone leaned in to hear it. "And make the call." The courtroom didn't just go silent, it stopped. Adrian blinked. "What?" "Make it now," Judge Caprio said. "On speaker, right here in open court. If one phone call can move justice, let the public hear how." It is hard to describe what that did to the room. It was outrage, disbelief, exhilaration, fear, and curiosity all at once. The reporter in the second row forgot to type. Owen Bell's mouth fell open. Officer Ruiz crossed her arms and waited. Everyone in that room knew this moment would go viral before the first clip ever hit a screen. Adrian laughed once, but it came out thin. "You're serious?" Judge Caprio's face did not change. "Completely. You have suggested outside power can direct this court. I am inviting you to test that theory in front of witnesses, injured citizens, counsel, and the record." Harrison stood so fast his chair nearly tipped. "Your Honor, I strongly advise against." "Counselor," Caprio said, never taking his eyes off Adrian, "if your client believes his uncle outranks justice, I prefer he learns otherwise while still young enough to benefit from it." That was the line. The line people would clip, repost, print on screens, and quote for months, but the hearing was not done. Adrian hesitated. For the first time, hesitation looked natural on him. He checked the gallery, maybe hoping someone would interrupt. No one did. He glanced at his mother. She gave a tiny shake of her head. It was not a warning, it was a plea. But pride hates witnesses. Pride would rather self-destruct than retreat in public. Slowly, Adrian pulled out his phone. You could hear the tap of his thumb on glass. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then a voice answered, male, clipped, older. "Thomas Mercer." Adrian swallowed. "Uncle Tom, I'm in court. This judge is making a whole spectacle out of a traffic incident and—" The governor cut him off. "Speaker." Adrian looked up startled. "Yeah." Another beat. Then the governor's voice came through the courtroom with unmistakable clarity. "Good. Then everyone can hear me say this once." Not a soul moved. "If you are calling to ask me to interfere with a judge, hang up now and don't ever make that mistake again. If you drove the way the reports say you drove, you are lucky you did not kill somebody. Face the court. Face the people you hurt. And for the first time in your life, stop using this family as a shield." The sound that escaped Charlotte Mercer was half sob, half relief. Adrian stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. "Uncle." "No," the governor said. "Listen carefully. Public office is not a broom for sweeping up private disgrace. If Judge Caprio is still willing to teach you something today, be smart enough to learn it." The line went dead. There are moments when humiliation curdles into rage. There are moments when it curdles into collapse. This was the second kind. Adrian did not sit right away. He just stood there, pale under the courtroom lights, looking suddenly younger and older at the same time. The confidence had not merely cracked. It had been taken away from him in public. Judge Caprio let the silence do its work for 3 full seconds. Then he spoke. "Mr. Mercer, the most important call you will ever make is not to power. It is to your conscience. And that line has been disconnected for a long time." People actually gasped again. Some because the line was devastating. Some because it was true. Harrison closed his eyes. Officer Ruiz looked at the floor. Maria Bell began crying quietly, not out of triumph exactly, but out of the release that comes when ordinary people finally hear the powerful told no. If you think moments like this matter because they teach everyone watching that influence has limits, hit that subscribe button right now. This was no longer just a courtroom hearing. This was civic oxygen. And yet the most surprising part of the story still hadn't happened. Adrian sat down hard. His hands shook. Not visibly at first, just enough to make the phone slip once against the polished wood. When he spoke again, the voice was different. Still Adrian S., but stripped of its usual armor. "I didn't think," he stopped, tried again. "I didn't think it was that bad." Judge Caprio answered immediately. That is the sentence of a man who has spent years being buffered from other people's pain. No anger, just diagnosis. Adrian looked at Maria first, then Louis, then Jamal. He couldn't hold any gaze for long. It was as if direct eye contact had become physically hot. "I saw the crash," he said weakly. "You saw damage," Jamal said from the front row. "You didn't see people." The courtroom turned toward him. Jamal wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His voice carried because truth often does. "You looked at your bumper before you looked at Mrs. Bell bleeding," he said. "You called your uncle before the ambulance got there. You acted like we were ruining your night. So don't tell us you didn't think. Tell us you didn't care enough to think." That sentence broke something open. Adrian's face tightened, and for one ugly instant it looked like he might lash out. Then his eyes filled instead. Not tears yet, just the pressure before them. Harrison placed a hand on his sleeve and removed it just as fast, maybe realizing this was the first honest moment his client had ever had in public and not wanting to contaminate it. Judge Caprio could have sentenced him right then. Many expected he would. Maximum fines, full suspension, public rebuke, referral. People wanted the satisfaction, some needed it. This was the point in most stories where punishment drops, the villain wilts, and viewers feel justice served. But real moral authority doesn't just know when to strike. It knows when striking is not enough. Before Caprio spoke, Maria Bell raised a trembling hand. "Your Honor," she said, "may I say one more thing?" He nodded. Maria turned toward Adrian, and there was no hatred in her face. That was the shocking part. After broken ribs, fear, and humiliation, there was still no hatred. There was sadness, tiredness, but no hatred. "My husband died 12 years ago," she said. "I know what it is to lose a person before they're in the ground. This young man is not dead, but something in him is badly lost. I do not want him crushed. I want him changed." The room inhaled sharply. Harrison looked stunned. Jamal frowned in conflicted disbelief. Lewis stared at Maria like he was witnessing a miracle he hadn't ordered. She continued, "Punish him, yes. Don't wink at this. Don't excuse it. But don't waste him. If he leaves here only humiliated, then all he learns is how pain feels when it finally reaches him. Make him learn how it feels when it reaches others." That may have been the moment the story stopped being about schadenfreude and became something deeper. Outrage is easy. Accountability with purpose is harder. Mercy without denial is harder still. And Maria Bell, 67, cracked rib, swollen wrist, cheap flats polished for court, had just asked the room to aim higher than revenge. Lewis slowly stood up. "Your Honor, I'm angry," he said. "I won't lie, I wanted him embarrassed. I wanted him scared. Maybe I still do, but Mrs. Bell is right about one thing. If he just pays and disappears, then people like him stay exactly the same." He faced Adrian. "I don't need your money first. I need you to understand what a month of lost work does to a family already one bill away from panic." Then Jamal, after a long pause, rose too. His jaw worked. He looked at Maria, then at Lewis, then finally at Adrian. "I'm not there yet," Jamal admitted. "I'm not feeling generous. But if this turns into some rich guy fine, that's garbage. If he gets to walk because his uncle won't take his call, that's garbage too. So if there's a path where he actually has to look at what he did every week for months, I'd rather have that than a speech." You could feel the whole room leaning toward the bench now. Even outrage wanted something better than a headline. It wanted transformation with proof. Judge Caprio nodded slowly, considering. "Very well," he said. "Then let us talk about a sentence that does not confuse pain with growth." He reviewed his authority once more. License suspension, fines, restitution, mandatory reporting, referral to driver retraining, public apology on record. But he added something within the court's discretion and the coordination of municipal restorative programming, structured community service directly tied to the harm caused, supervised victim impact education, and monthly review hearings in open court. Adrian looked up, confused through tears. "You're not sending me to jail." Caprio's eyes hardened just enough. "Do not mistake mercy for softness. Jail would be simpler. I am considering something more difficult." Everyone waited. "Mr. Mercer," the judge continued, "here is the choice before you. I can impose the maximum penalties available to this court, suspend your license for a significant period, enter full findings, and be done with you. Or I can still impose serious penalties and, in addition, require you to spend the next 9 months earning the right to say you learned anything from this day." Adrian said nothing. "You will pay full restitution to all injured parties and documented losses. You will lose your driving privileges for 12 months. You will complete 500 hours of community service, not at a charity gala where people clap because you showed up, but through the Pedestrian Trauma Recovery Program coordinated with Rhode Island Hospital and the city's Street Safety Initiative. You will attend every monthly review here, in public. You will write letters, not polished by counsel but handwritten to each person you injured, and if they choose not to read them, that is their right. You will also speak to high school students about reckless driving and entitled decision-making, because shame can rot a person, but responsibility can rebuild one. Courtroom was stunned by the architecture of it. This was not leniency. It was accountability stretched over time, impossible to fake for long. And if you miss, lie, posture, perform, or attempt to influence any part of this process, Judge Caprio said, voice now like steel under velvet, I will use every consequence available to me and recommend every additional one beyond me. Do you understand? Adrian nodded once, then realized nodding was too weak. Yes, sir. No, the judge said. Use words. You have used enough careless ones for one lifetime. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. Do you accept that this happened because of your choices, not because of your family name? Adrian swallowed hard. Yes. Do you accept that the people in this room are not background characters in your life? That was the question, maybe the whole story in one sentence. Adrian looked at Maria, then Louis, then Jamal, and now the tears came for real. His voice broke on the answer. Yes. He stood on shaking legs and turned toward them fully, no lawyer between them, no phone in hand, no uncle to call, no scripted defense left. I'm sorry is often a cheap phrase because it arrives too easily. This one did not. Mrs. Bell, Mr. Battista, Jamal, I am sorry, not for how this looks, not because I got caught. I'm sorry because I treated your lives like they were smaller than my inconvenience. And hearing it out loud, he stopped, tears catching. Hearing what it did to your families, I don't know how to make that sentence big enough. No one rescued him from the silence. I thought respect came with my name, he continued. I thought consequences were things other people had to survive. I was wrong. I have been wrong for years. If you give me the chance to prove this isn't just another speech, I will take it. That line mattered because of what it admitted. He did not claim instant redemption. He did not ask to be understood. He asked to be tested. Judge Caprio nodded once. That is the first useful sentence you have spoken all morning. The room laughed softly through tears and tension, a human release valve after so much pressure. Even Jamal let the corner of his mouth move. If you believe true accountability should leave room for change without letting anyone off the hook, like this video, and tell us in the comments. This is where most stories take the easy turn. This one didn't, because the judge wasn't finished, and neither was life after the sentence. The formal ruling entered the record at 11:26 a.m. Restitution was scheduled, license suspended, fine imposed, community service structure outlined, monthly review dates set through July 2026, written apology requirement, completion of an advanced driver accountability course, participation in 3 city-sponsored traffic safety assemblies. Referral of the interference remarks to the appropriate authorities, accompanied by a note from the bench that public confidence in the law depends on visible independence from influence. Then came the line that made the clip immortal. Judge Caprio looked at Adrian and said, "Power is not proven by who fears you. Power is proven by what you protect. From this day forward, protect somebody other than yourself." That quote would be replayed by millions. Teachers would use it. Commentators would praise it. Cynics would roll their eyes at it. But nobody who heard it forgot it. The hearing ended, yet nobody rushed out. People lingered because it felt wrong to leave a room where something unusually clean had just happened. Reporters crowded the hallway. Microphones appeared. But the most important moment after court was not with cameras. It was in the corridor near the vending machines, where Adrian, still pale, asked Officer Ruiz if he could say something. She looked at him for a long moment. "Depends. Is it for the record or for your image?" "For neither," he said. "For me." Officer Ruiz crossed her arms. "Then say it plain." He did. "When you told me to step back from Mrs. Bell, I thought you were disrespecting me. You were trying to protect people. I'm sorry for threatening your badge." Ruiz studied him. "Apology noted, keep showing up. That's what makes it real." It was not forgiveness. It was better than that. It was a condition. The first month was ugly. Adrian traded the Escalade for a driver, and then, when the driver arrangement became too embarrassing to sustain, for rides from friends who suddenly seemed less eager to help once the headlines cooled. His Brioni jacket stayed in the closet while he reported 3 mornings a week to the pedestrian trauma recovery desk at Rhode Island Hospital. He wore a plain gray volunteer polo that did not care who his uncle was. He pushed wheelchairs, delivered forms, walked families to imaging, restocked water cups. He met people whose lives were split cleanly into before and after by one careless second. At first he was terrible at it. He moved too fast, spoke too formally, offered help in ways T sounded performative. Staff noticed. Patients noticed. One elderly man with a leg brace told him, "Son, stop talking like a brochure and hand me that blanket." A nurse named Lee Patterson, 42, practical and impossible to impress, became his supervisor. She had no interest in his family and less interest in his self-pity. "Don't come in here trying to redeem yourself to strangers," she told him on day 4. "Come in here ready to reduce somebody else's burden by 5%. Do that enough times and maybe redemption happens in the background." He wrote that down that night. For the first time in years, he started writing down things that didn't flatter him. At the first monthly review, November 18, 2025, Adrian returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom looking less expensive and more awake. No Rolex, no blazer, navy crewneck, cheap black notebook in hand. The gallery was thinner than before, but Maria came. So did Jamal. Louis couldn't attend because Carla had another appointment, but he sent receipts, updated wage loss numbers, and a short note that read, "Watching actions, not words." Judge Caprio asked for the service log. Nurse Patterson submitted it, every hour completed. No absences. Strong effort after initial adjustment. Needs to listen more, explain less. The court laughed softly at that final line. Adrian did too, and that was a new sound. Less polished, more human. "Mr. Mercer," the judge asked, "what have you learned?" Adrian answered carefully. "That injury has paperwork attached to it, not just pain. Forms, delays, rides, missed shifts, missed sleep. Also that I've spent a lot of my life trying to control how I'm seen instead of how I behave." Judge Caprio nodded. "Continue." In December, the weather turned hard and sharp, and so did the work. Adrian began assisting with a city street safety initiative at schools in Providence and Cranston. He stood in front of teenagers who knew exactly who he was from clips online. They expected a polished redemption speech. Instead, he started with the sentence Caprio had forced out of him. "I thought consequences were for other people," he told a gym full of sophomores at Hope High School. "That belief almost destroyed 3 lives and probably would have destroyed mine too if the court had let me keep it." Kids, more than adults, can smell fake from across a room, but he answered questions without ducking. Yes, he threatened a judge. Yes, he tried to use family influence. Yes, he cared more about his car than injured strangers in the first minutes after the crash. No, the judge did go easy. He made him live with what he did. A sophomore in a varsity jacket asked, "So what was the worst part? Getting embarrassed online?" Adrian shook his head. "No, realizing the person on that footage wasn't a misunderstanding. It was me." That clip went around almost as fast as the first one. January brought the twist nobody predicted. Jamal Reed called the court coordinator, and asked if Adrian would be willing to visit the design studio he'd lost the internship with. Not to clear his conscience, not for a photo, to carry boxes for a winter exhibition setup because Jamal's shoulder still hurt on overhead lifts. When Adrian showed up, he wore work gloves and said almost nothing. He hauled frames, assembled stands, and took instruction from a 19-year-old he had once treated like street clutter. It rained that day too, hard against the loading dock windows. At one point, Jamal handed him a stack of poster tubes and said, "Higher, careful, those matter." Adrian caught the irony immediately. "I know," he said. By lunch, the tension had thinned enough for honesty. Jamal looked over and said, "You know why I agreed to this?" "No." "Because if I keep you frozen in the worst 10 seconds of your life, then I become a prisoner of them too." Adrian set the box down slowly. "I don't know what to say to that." "You don't need to say anything," Jamal said. "Just don't waste it." That was forgiveness in work clothes, not sentiment. A release valve, not a hug. And it changed Adrian more than any public praise could have. By February, the handwritten letters were done. Maria's was the hardest. He rewrote it 11 times. The final version did not defend him or explain childhood pain or mention stress. It said plainly that he had dehumanized her, that he had seen vulnerability and responded with annoyance, that no family standing could excuse moral laziness, and that he would spend the coming years trying to become the kind of man a frightened grandmother would not have to fear at a crosswalk. Maria read it twice at her kitchen table while Owen did homework beside her. She cried both times, then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept funeral cards, baptism announcements, and the other documents that mark a life by what mattered. At the March review hearing, something extraordinary happened. Louis Battista brought his daughter Sophia. She was 10 shy and wearing a purple puffer jacket. Judge Caprio remembered her name from the letter and smiled gently. Sophia stepped forward and handed the clerk a folded paper. It was a drawing. On one side, a black SUV near a red light. On the other, the same intersection with people stopping safely and a figure in a bright vest helping kids cross. Over the second half she had written, "People can learn." There are moments when an entire courtroom realizes the smallest person present understands justice better than the loudest adults. This was one. Louis looked at Adrian and said, "My daughter wanted you to have a copy." Adrian took it with both hands. "Thank you," he whispered, and he meant it in a way he probably had not meant thank you in years. Judge Caprio saw all of this. He saw that the public clip had become private labor. He saw that accountability was no longer theatrical. It had entered repetition, and repetition is where character either collapses or changes. Still, he didn't relax the terms. "Mr. Mercer," he said in March, "progress is not graduation. Keep going." "Yes, Your Honor." April came with clearer skies and one last severe test. A local political consultant offered Adrian a media strategy package to reclaim the narrative. Television appearances, magazine profile, family rehabilitation angle, a glossy spread about adversity and lessons learned. The old Adrian would have accepted before the sentence ended. This Adrian brought the email to Charlotte, then to Nurse Patterson, then, at the next review, disclosed it in open court. Judge Caprio looked at him for a long moment. "And what did you do?" "I declined," Adrian said, "because if I turn this into branding, I poison it." Caprio's eyes softened just a fraction. "Good. Growth that advertises itself too quickly often isn't growth, it's camouflage." By May, Adrian had completed 367 service hours. He had spoken at 5 schools. He had assisted in 27 patient family support shifts. He had paid all current restitution installments on time. He had sold a watch to close the final gap in Louis Battista's wage loss reimbursement before the insurance dispute resolved. Nobody told him to do that. He simply did it and filed the receipt. The most talked about moment of the spring, though, came at a small community center in South Providence. A young man in the crowd, 17 and angry, stood up during a safe driving talk and said, "Easy for you now. You got caught. If you never got caught, you'd still be exactly the same." The room went tight. Everybody waited to see if Adrian would defend himself. He didn't. "You're right," he said. "If I had gotten away with it again, I probably would have stayed exactly the same. That's why accountability matters. Not because it humiliates us, because sometimes it interrupts us before we become permanent." That clip went viral too, but for a different reason. Not because a judge had destroyed a bully, because a bully had finally stopped arguing with the truth. June brought the final review before completion. The gallery was packed again, not with curiosity this time but with investment. People wanted to know if the transformation would hold. Maria came wearing the same blue cardigan. Louis came in a better-fitted suit because his shoulder had improved and he'd returned full-time. Jamal came carrying a portfolio tube. Charlotte came quietly and sat in the back, not trying to be seen. Officer Ruiz came on her own time. Nurse Patterson came because she had become part of the story whether she liked it or not. Judge Caprio reviewed every report, perfect attendance since sentence, positive evaluations, meaningful engagement, no attempts to leverage family status, no violations, additional voluntary service hours beyond requirement. Then he asked Jamal if he wished to speak. Jamal stood, shoulders squared, and held up a poster from his tube. It was a campaign design mock-up for the city's summer street safety program. Bold colors, crosswalk stripes turning into protective arms. At the bottom, a line Adrian had said at Hope High School, "Respect the red light. Somebody's whole life is crossing." "I got the internship back," Jamal said. "Actually, I got hired part-time for the summer. This campaign is mine. Mr. Mercer did not design it. He just carried boards and listened when I talked. A lot. More than he probably wanted to." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. "Do I forgive him completely?" Jamal continued. "I don't know if forgiveness is a finish line, but I know this. The guy in the footage is not the guy who showed up in January in work gloves while I yelled about poster spacing. So that counts." Then Maria rose. "I want the court to know," she said, "that Mr. Mercer came to my church bake sale in April, not for cameras. There were none. He stacked folding chairs, carried boxes to cars, and when my wrists started aching, he tied my apron strings for me because I couldn't reach behind easily. He looked me in the eye the whole time. That mattered." Louis spoke last. "My wife asked me to say this. She says pain can either make people harder or more useful. We prefer useful." By now the room was openly emotional. Tears. Smiles through tears. That look people get when they witness something they didn't expect to believe in. Judge Caprio turned to Adrian. "Mr. Mercer, stand." He did. "When you entered this courtroom in October, you believed power was the ability to avoid shame. Today you stand here having learned that dignity is the ability to face truth without running. Do not romanticize this. You caused harm. You carried privilege like a weapon. You spoke to this court as if justice were negotiable, but you also submitted to accountability when resistance would have been easier." Adrian's eyes shone. He didn't wipe them. That mattered too. "I find substantial compliance with every condition," Judge Caprio said. "Your progress is recognized. Certain reporting requirements are concluded. Restitution monitoring remains until